and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask for those that have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it to the silent mode. Officiating is Rabbi Joel Gutstein.
We will begin with the recitation of Tehillim. We ask Rabbi Matenki to come forward and recite the 2 chapters of Tehillim.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני מי יגור באוהליך, מי ישכון בהר קודשך. הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה וחרפה לא נשא לקרובו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס ואת יראי אדוני יכבד. נשבע להרע ולא ימיר, כספו לא נתן בנשך. ושוחד על נקי לא לקח. עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם. A song of David, Lord, who may sojourn in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountains, one who walks in purity, does what is righteous and speaks the truth from the heart, who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor cast disgrace toward a neighbor, in whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in the awe of the Lord, who swears truthfully even to personal hurt, and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binodeshe yarbitzeni al memenuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begeit tzal mavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, Hema Yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai deshanta vashemen roshi kosi revaya. Achtov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti beveit Adonai liorech yamim. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. He causes me to lie down in lush pastures and leads me beside tranquil waters. He restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy scepter and staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in full view of my adversaries. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Since it is the month of Nisan, the month which we celebrate the holiday of Passover, so eulogies are not said. Rather, we tell stories, relate ideas about the deceased. So we rarely adjust our davening schedule for an individual in shul. It's only the second time we've done it. However, in honor of Joe, Yosef Daniel ben Yoshua, knowing that most of the shul members who are in town would want to be here this evening, so we changed our davening times so people will be able to pay Joe the proper tribute due him. So Joe and Tibot L'chaim, Sue, moved to our neighborhood, I think it's about 10 years ago. And they came to our shul. So they met them the first time. They asked me to come over and share with them ideas how to kasher the kitchen, which doorways to place mezuzahs. We hit it off immediately, and we've had a wonderful relationship since the initial meeting. So Joe was very much a shul person. He often gave good suggestions regarding various shul matters. On occasion, he would lead the first part of the Shabbos morning davening, the Pesukei de Zimra. In addition to Shabbos attendance, he attended regularly Mincha Maariv, and and Sunday mornings. However, since COVID, Joe was caring for Sue, could not attend the davening. So for the past several years, he faithfully davened and watched the minyan on Zoom almost every weekday Mincha Maariv service and 8:30 Shachri service. If ever I forgot to put on the Zoom, which happened on occasion, So he had emailed me, and I apologized to him. Someone just forgot about it, okay? But and if he ever knew he wasn't going to be on, he would tell me in advance, but he knew he couldn't make it. And not only did he watch the davening, daven along with the minyan, respond with Ament at the proper times, he also sponsored the Zoom davening in memory of his parents and Sue's parents, Sidney and Isabella Ament, and David and Yenna Grossman. Joe was also a community person. He donated and supported several organizations, and he believed in the organizations he supported. So whether it was the Shul, and No Shame on You, Ida Crown, the Jewish Federations, or others, and every year he invited us and several Shul members to join him at the dinners or annual affairs of those organizations, all at his expense. Remember, he was one in charge of the dinners. He's the only one who actually invited guests to come with him to the at the Ida Crown to the dinner, because he very firmly believed in the school, and it's a wonderful school, and he wanted to show it off. He felt it was important for people to know about and appreciate the educational and other institutions that play major roles in our city. The Torah portion that we read yesterday, and we'll read this coming week, the Torah discusses sacrifices that people would offer in the Beis Hamikdash in the temple in Jerusalem. One of the sacrifices a person could offer was called an olah, a burnt offering. It could be offered even if a person just wanted to make a donation to the Beis Hamikdash to say thank you to God for all the good that he gave that person. So Joe would have been giving these offerings on a daily basis. He felt about his family, his children, his grandchildren. He felt so blessed from God for all of them, and recently, thank God, also a great grandson. He frequently told me, although he could not attend all of the weddings and all the happy occasions, he made sure to watch them. He felt blessed to have his children, Jonathan and Amy, Jeremy and Neva, Miriam and David. He was the happy grandfather of Yakira and Ari, Tali and Matanel, Gabi and Yair, Ezra, Joshua, Nadiv, Adina, Ayala, and Usher, and the proud great-grandfather of David Achia. He would speak praises of his brothers, Dr. Marvin and Judith, and Ronald and Barbara. Every August there was the Ament family reunion at our shul. And he would tell me in advance which kid or grandchild is going to lead which part of the service, going to do the Torah reading. And he would just sit there and shep nachas, listening to the whichever one of his family members was leading. And he always had an aliyah, I think it was one of his grandchildren, reading from the Torah, which he, again, made him feel wonderful. However, the one for whom Joe would give the most, really his innumerable sacrifices, was his wife of 59 years, Sue. He was totally devoted to her. Whatever she needed, he was there for her. For the past few years, he did everything for her, taking her to organization dinners, again, whether to Ida Crown, to the shul, the federation, No Shame on You, shopping, cooking, inviting guests. He was a Superman. And the strength that he displayed was beyond what many people half of his age could accomplish. And he wouldn't take help. He would not take assistance. Several times, my wife and I offered, we would do shopping for him, anything else he needed, but he wouldn't hear of it. He didn't want to take advantage of anybody else, even though we didn't view it as taking advantage. We just didn't offer a friendship, but he wouldn't hear from it. So my wife and I and the entire Yehuda Moshe family are proud to have known and been so closely associated with Joe. Yosef Daniel ben Yoshua. We've missed him in shul these past few months since he became sick, and we'll sorely miss him in shul in the future. May his soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. We'll now hear from some of the family members.
I didn't expect to be first. I'm Marvin Ament. I'm the middle of the Ament brothers, and I'm going to speak what my son, my brother Ronald wrote, and then I'll talk about my experience with Joe. It is with a heavy heart that Barbara and I are unable to be with you this evening. Our daughter-in-law has had unexpected surgery and is immobilized for 3 weeks. We were needed in Raleigh, North Carolina, where they live, to help take care of our grandchildren, but our hearts are here with you. Joe was a brother, a brother-in-law, a husband, a father, a great-grandfather, a friend, a teacher, a mentor, a public speaker, a man who wore many hats during his lifetime. He was a man of faith who practiced his religious beliefs daily, never wavering. As a child, Joe was my big brother. He always looked after me, tried to keep me out of mischief, and protected me from Marvin. Great. We were always there for each other. He was 8 years older than I, so I used to sit and watch him play poker on the dining room table with his Roosevelt High School friends. I blame him for my corruption, which he had. On Father's Day, we would spend the afternoon at Arlington Park and then enjoy a family dinner together. And I remember seeing all these tickets from Arlington Park and didn't really understand what they were for. Family was always first for him, but he still found time to work tirelessly for the Jewish community on innumerable committees and with professional tax and legal organizations. Barbara and I recall all of the holidays we spent together with Joe, Susan, and the kids. Be it a Jewish holiday, a secular holiday, or a Shabbos meal, we were always together. This tradition continues up until just weeks ago, when Joe's illness made it impossible for him to participate. It is a testament of love that brought all of his children and grandchildren to visit him from across the globe to reinforce the love and respect for him that they had received all of their lives. Joe did, however, have one shortcoming. He was mechanically challenged. He was able to screw in a light bulb, but that was about the extent of his mechanical ability. He always knew that I, Ron, would come to the rescue. Word sums up Joe: commitment. He always gave 100%, and we were all the better for it. He was always been in our hearts, and that's from Ron and Barbara. I didn't make it write a prepared talk, which I'm used to doing. I was the middle son in the family, and Joe was sort of the person I looked up to. I had all the same teachers in elementary and high school for the first 2 years that he had. And they always say, "Oh, you're Joe's brother." And that could have gone one of two ways. I could have either rebelled and not follow his footsteps or exceeded him, and I exceeded him. When he went to the University of Illinois, the Champaign-Urbana, and I started Navy Pier just for the first 2 years of my schooling. When it came time to move on, I chose to go to Illinois Institute of Technology because I didn't want to compete with anything that was going on downstate and wanted my own independence. He sort of ruled our household. My mother and father, I think, let Joe take over for running the household when he finished school down at Champaign-Urbana and came back to Chicago and was in law school while working as a CPA. And I remember how it had to be so quiet on Sunday morning. I guess he went out on Saturday night. And I remember so well that my mother would say, "Shh, your brother's sleeping." And I, of course, did not like it. Because he had such a profound, he made my mother more kosher than she ever was. And that was another thing I remember so well, that if it wasn't Joe didn't approve of it, we didn't have it in the house. And that was very different than before he went to school, when she just did her own version of what was kosher. Again, because of the differences, he went one path. By the time I was in high school, I decided business was not for me. Again, I had to work like Joe did, because when he was 12 years old, he worked in a food store on North Avenue. I can remember how proud my mother was that he had a job at age 12, which I guess doesn't exist today. And I got a job at 11 and a half at a drugstore. I mean, it was amazing, but he was my impetus probably to do well. And then I left Chicago. I left Chicago because I wanted to have a different experience and because I thought it would just be best for me because he really ruled the roost at the house. And, I have no regrets of that because I don't think if I went away to school like I did, I wouldn't have accomplished what I did and would not have married my wife, who I met through work. So I can only say he was outstanding. Ron said everything about him. I'm not going to basically repeat it, but I said he was outstanding, and I hope that I am going to be equal to him. I have 3 sons, and all my sons are very committed to the family. And I have 2 grandsons who go to Chabad, and that I think is related in some way to Joe and the upbringing that we had. Thank you very much.
Ron and Barbara also asked that this poem be read. So it's by Mary Fry. It says, "Do not stand at my graveyard and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die."
Uncle Marvin, that was great. That was really great. Thank you. Okay, first, I'm married to Neva. I'm Jeremy, one of the sons, the middle kid, like Uncle Marvin, a middle child. And my wife, Neva, wrote the following. My dearest dad, Zadie, thank you. Thank you for always being our center. Thank you for accepting me as your daughter. Thank you for being Jeremy's confidant, the one Jeremy goes to for advice, for sharing, for insights, for inspiration. Thank you for being the prince of a husband you have been to Bubby, for showing us what love is all about, pure devotion. Thank you, along with Bubby, for giving our children experiences beyond our wildest dreams that have become the highlights of their childhoods. Thank you for teaching us what is important in life, family, family, family. Thank you for instilling in us your Torah values, the importance of learning, growing, and giving. You are known to many, your students, your lifetime friends, your colleagues, for your wisdom, for being an ish chesed, a giving person, for your idiosyncratic speech, with great attention to detail. But my dear Zadie, I so appreciated your seemingly simple ability to listen, to really listen. You made all of us feel special as you listened and learned about us. You relished hearing about our interests and lives, and you so naturally drew us close to you as you were our biggest fan. I had the privilege of saying goodbye in the last few months. While it was devastating to see you in your weakened state, you still retain your essence. I asked you a few difficult questions that required reflection. As the pain subsided, I asked, what gives you strength during the hard days? You answered, remembering the good days. You talked about feeling blessed and full of gratitude for the bountiful blessings you were given. That is your essence, the ability to see the positive, to stay optimistic, to remain laser focused on the good. The world will not be the same without Joe Ament, our dad, our Zadie. We will do our best to continue to make you proud. Zadie, when we said goodbye to each other lately, I would tell you I loved you, and you would smirk and reply, I know you do. I'm going to miss that. Zadie, I love you. Okay, now it's me. And this is the short version with apologies. The passing of Yimori, of Dad, Haranik Habrat Mishkavo, fittingly coincides with the approach of Pesach, of Passover, in which the topic of firstborns gets a bunch of attention. This is relevant because Dad was the firstborn of 3 spectacular sons. Dad, Marvin, 2 years younger, and Ron, 8 years younger. The very first words Moses was instructed by God to say to Pharaoh, were, B'ni B'chori Yisrael. The nation of Israel is my firstborn child. Now, we know from the biblical stories of the foremothers and forefathers, being a firstborn is a tricky topic. Rivalries and resentment litter the landscape of some of these firstborn dramas. It's been explained, though, that with these 3 words of Exodus, B'ni B'chori Yisrael, the nation of Israel is my firstborn child, the Torah is now pivoting. It's pivoting away from the challenging circumstances in the book of Genesis, and it is giving all of us, all of the Jewish nation, a very special calling to adopt as a nation, as a people, all of us together, the very best of what it is to be a firstborn, a Bechor. So inheritance laws notwithstanding, what is it to be the very best as a firstborn? Understood properly, it's to be an inspiring leader, to faithfully reflect and perpetuate the worthy values of one's predecessors, one's parents, to be an example to the others in the family, and to hopefully draw them in and inspire them to fulfill our special mission. In the case of the Jewish people, our mission as a firstborn, as a Bechor, was given to our forefather Abraham, and it's summarized as V'nivruchu v'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, that all of the families of earth, all of humanity, will be blessed through us. At its best, being a Bechor is not receiving an extra blessing, it's being a source of blessing to give, a continuous source of blessing to give. You okay? By this measure, by this standard, Dad, Yosef Daniel ben Yoshua Bela, he was a next-level, extraordinary firstborn, a Bechor at the very, very, very best level. Dad was on the Mount Rushmore of Bechors. He was a unanimous first ballot Hall of Fame Bechor. Pick your superlative, plug in Dad. He was exceedingly worthy of the title. For someone like Dad, whose force of blessing was so magically able to touch so many parts of humanity, so it's tempting to focus on these many and varied elements of society where Dad's blessed presence was felt. Dad essentially had 3 simultaneous full-time careers: a founding partner of his beloved law firm, a full professor at Roosevelt University for 52 years, and as a business person, all at the same time. He called his work, though, as a professor, his psychic income. Teaching and mentoring filled him with tremendous satisfaction. Uncle Marvin, as a teaching doctor, gets to do both at the same time. For Jewish students who needed a place to pray in the morning in order to attend early morning classes, Dad's office was used. When the top accounting firms would turn to Dad for recommendations on hires, he would use the opportunity to encourage the hiring partners at these top firms to think outside the box and hire his top students, even though they were religiously observant and would be absent from the office on certain work days, weekdays, and leave early for certain weekends. Or, in some cases, in the case of non-Jews, it would be someone who was noticeably an immigrant or a first-generation American and wouldn't seamlessly fit into corporate culture. But those were his top students, and he challenged the corporate culture and used his platform to try and make change. He would also share professional opportunities with colleagues at the faculty level, whom he thought deserved the chance, but might have been overlooked because their lifestyles or appearances were outside of the mainstream. Dad eagerly shared his blessing and recognized the source. When he was honored by Roosevelt University with an endowed chair, he spent the entire acceptance speech at the hotel teaching the hundreds of people there about hakarat hatov, about gratitude, giving thanks to the many who had helped him along the way. It seemed, and he learned that perhaps in Cheder from Trudy Matanki. It seemed that Dad could not go on vacation or some other trip without running into a former student. It was sort of a parlor game. Who's he going to run to in Vegas? Who is he going to run to in Europe? Who is he going to run to in Israel? And each time he met a former student, it filled his heart. At the same time, somehow, Dad prioritized involvement in a myriad of Jewish communal engagements, whether statewide on the hills of Illinois, citywide with his beloved Jewish Federation and the various divisions and committees to which he devoted his time and effort for decades, educationally at Schechter and his life board membership involvement at the Ida Crown Jewish Academy, or most locally at the synagogues he attended, Bethel and then Yehuda Moshe. And for sure I'm neglecting to mention other worthy communal engagements. Apologies. And the friendships that Dad nurtured, whether from childhood or from his early career as an accountant, Jimmy, Phil, Ed, through his adult life, from so many periods and spheres in his life. Dad knew no bounds of race, religion, politics, or lifestyle and who his friends were. Dad had amazing reach as a friend, and we, the kids, got to know and love amazing people through Dad's friendships. People, certain of them, who became like uncles to us. And one of them is my godfather in Sandak. Dad lived the description of his biblical namesake Joseph, of whom it is said in the Torah, Vayihi Hashem et Yosef, Vayihi ish matzliach. God was with Joseph, and he was a successful person. Importantly, for anyone familiar with the story of Joseph, Joseph's story is in no way a story of a string of uninterrupted successes. The Torah is teaching us a powerful lesson in calling specifically Joseph a successful person, in calling specifically Joseph a person who felt God with him throughout. Joseph experienced humiliation, incarceration, slavery, estrangement from his family, just to name a few. And yet, the Torah goes out of its way to attach to Joseph, the description of success and of God being with him. How can such a challenged life be such a successful, God-kissed life? To quote Viktor Frankl, the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. In every one of the above spheres of Dad's life, Dad, like the biblical Joseph, experienced at times challenges, crises, slights, and disappointments. And to his everlasting credit, Dad, in context, was more than prepared to talk to us about them and to turn them into teachable moments. Time and again, he kept the bigger picture in front of him. His lens did not remain focused on those challenges. He drew out the lens to gain perspective and to appreciate the blessed life he knew he was given. Each of these rich, extraordinary elements of Dad's professional, communal, and social life is truly worthy of its own full, expanded treatment. This is just a thumbnail sketch. And each has its own inspiring, epic, and at times wacky stories, and you can't make this up moments. Incredible, incredible stuff. I mean, just crazy stuff. Every one of them is its own Dayenu, as it were. Each would be an overstuffed reflection on blessed accomplishments and achievements in Dad's life. Each, it's his own rabbit hole to get lost in. But none of these would be truly touching on the earthly centerpiece of Dad's Jewish-guided life, Jewish-guided universe. That is his family. Here, too, the spheres and influences and connections were multiple and deep. As a son, Dad so adored his parents, Zichronam Livracha, Grandma and Grandpa Ament, to us. After his cancer diagnosis, on more than one occasion, Dad, Harini Kaprat Mishkavo, related that he attributes so much of what he achieved in life to the love of his parents. Not just that they loved him, not just that he felt their love, but they were regularly conveying to him that they loved him. And at the very same time, if there was something to be improved, they would emphasize that they loved him, but it didn't also mean that they liked everything that he did, and suggested what could be improved. Grandma won Dad and all of us over with her masterful baking and cooking and doting ways, and Grandpa, who Dad called Pa, won Dad over with his sweetness, even as he shared his expectations. Dad as a brother. Dad's beloved parents, and you heard a little bit from Marvin, they challenged Dad as the Bechor, as the firstborn, to be his youngest brother Ron's keeper. So as it was told to us, when Dad, Harini Kaparat Mishkavo, wanted to go out with his boyfriends as an active 16-year-old, he was welcome to do so as long as Ron joined them. So Ron, apparently who his friends, Dad's friends would apparently call the squirt, became a junior part of Dad's buddies, and there developed an extraordinarily close lifelong friendship from a very young age between Dad and Ron. Uncle Ron and Aunt Barbara live nearby in Morton Grove, so they have been a blessed, regular presence in our lives for decades, for forever. Ron was Dad's confidant and close friend, and they accompanied each other to the hospital for each other's illnesses. They were seemingly always there for each other. When we lived in Highland Park, Dad and Mom made sure that the cupboard was stocked with cookies at all times, in case Ron had one of his contracting jobs in the neighborhood and would basically barge into the house to get some cookies and use the facilities. Always a fun visit. Dad also maintained a very special connection and bond with Uncle Marvin, despite Uncle Marvin having established his adult life on the West Coast over half a century ago. Each counseled the other, with Uncle Marvin providing life-saving advice on more than one occasion. Uncle Marvin and Aunt Judith each went out of their way to attend family simchas, including the bar and bat mitzvahs and weddings of grandchildren in New York and Israel, as did Uncle Ron and Aunt Barbara. Dad mentioned to me a number of times recently that the last plane flight he took was to Los Angeles 6 years ago to celebrate Uncle Marvin's 80th birthday, and he was so happy he did it. As an uncle, Dad took loving interest in all of his nieces and nephews and spouses and children, Noah and Allie, Josh and Aaron, Zachary, Michael and Devdarshan, David and Amy, Abby, Andy and David, Koa and Oliver. At Dad's 80th birthday party in Israel on the weekend of our son Nadiv's bar mitzvah, we had a very special Saturday night evening of tribute in which we went around the table and everyone shared an appreciation of Dad. It moved me to tears to hear from siblings like Marvin and nephews of Dad what he had meant to them and done for them in terms of counsel, mentoring, encouragement, and support, quietly and behind the scenes. It was so special to provide them on an occasion to share this with Dad, letting him feel the love for him. Dad loved all of you very, very much. As a parent, for all that Dad accomplished, he took immense delight in seeing his kids go beyond what he achieved. Already from a young age, John, our Bechor, and Dad bonded over their shared interests in history and geography. Since our first plane trip as a family was in high school, every trip around the country in the years preceding high school was by car, around the country. So for Miriam and me, the rides were not the most fun. For me, because at this time in my life, I was not interested in anything except for sports. And Miriam, because John and I made her sit in the middle seat with that bump over the floor of the car where one's feet would go, and it was never fun for her. But for John and for Dad, it was an adventure. Navigating the roads of our beautiful country, looking for the domes of the state capitals, learning about towns and cities, connecting their names to people and events in American history, and I had no clue what was going on. As John got older, his interests expanded even further, and he and Dad became the go-to people for all things genealogical. John is Dad's trusted partner on matters of family history. Dad carried on from his own father the connection to the Verine, the township from which his father came to America. Dad would go every Elul to the annual gathering in the Chicago area cemetery for the Verine to commemorate community members. As the years passed and the numbers of participants dwindled, Dad eventually led these ceremonies, becoming the lay rabbi. John carries on that knowledge and connection to the roots of our family in Europe, something that I know was always meaningful to Dad. Dad, delighted in John's professional immersion in the Chicago Jewish Federation, also as a double-decker bus Chicago tour guide, and then as a double PhD and college professor. Dad may have been a JD, an MBA, and a CPA, and Phi Beta Kappa, but a double PhD he was not, and John is nachas for Dad. Miriam was always the apple of Dad's eye, his special princess. Fast forward to Miriam becoming an integral part of the complex litigation team at one of the country's leading law firms, and Dad was in awe. Fast forward a bit more, and Dad saw Miriam pivot, converting a personal challenge into a social entrepreneurial mission and opportunity, leaving the world of big law for the holy cause of mental health advocacy, and making an impact in the greater Chicago Jewish community that was so dear already to Dad. Few things gave Dad greater pride than to be identified as the father of Miriam in the Chicago community, and the lives that Miriam has saved and impacted in her holy mental health advocacy work. Now, Miriam is not going to speak tonight, and so she asked for me to convey to Dad how much she loves him, and how much she misses him, and how much she appreciates him, and all that Dad has been for her. Good? Good. Of course, Dad's love for his kids expanded to his newest kids of the past few decades, Amy, David, and Neva. Dad loved and adored each of them as his own children, and he told them. They knew it. He most recently told Neva in the hospital when she was visiting and feeding him that she was his favorite, which in context clearly meant that he preferred her to me. He felt the same about Amy and David, obviously. Total winners and blessings for the family. Should also be mentioned that Dad crushed it as a cousin. He had tens and tens of cousins. He was the bechor, the oldest of them, at least one side of the family. And he maintained and cherished relationships with so many of them over the many decades. As a Zaidi, Dad was a dream Zaidi to Yakira and Tali, Gabi, Nadiv, Ayot, and Osher. I'm not going to speak on behalf of your children, I'm sure also as well. And also to Ari, Matanel, and Yair. It gave Dad so much pleasure to be driving a 15-seater van every summer for many years when everybody would come in to experience what my mom planned as the amazing Ament adventures in the summertime. It gave him tremendous nachas for their 50th anniversary that everybody came in to Alaska for a kosher cruise to celebrate their anniversary. And it meant the world to Dad that now, months before what was to have been his 60th anniversary with Mom, every single one of you Israelis who did not actually become a parent and give birth during Dad's brief illness flew to Chicago to be with Zaidi, including 3 who received special permission from Tzahal to come. And as to the new parents who provided Zaidi, his first great-grandchild, an indescribably massive bundle of nachas for Dad, the very last message Dad received during his life from the Israeli branch of his family was a video shot on Friday before Shabbat by the parents, Gabi, our daughter, and Yair, her husband, and the great-grandson, David Achiyah, sharing love and appreciation to Zaidi. Dad watched carefully, and at the very end, he proceeded to blow kisses at the screen. Zaidi provided unconditional love to each of you, took deep interest in each of you, was so incredibly proud of every one of your achievements and milestones. And as each of you grew up, he has appreciated the people you were becoming, the paths you have been taking, and in the case of the 3 granddaughters who got married, the wonderful choices and spouses that you made. His love for and pride in Israel found special expression in you. Coming to visit you and be part of your smachot, whether in person or in Zoom, it always filled his heart. As a husband, Dad was a man of prose and practicality. Books of legal code, James Bond movies, James Patterson books, TV crime procedurals. That was Dad. Mom is a woman of poetry and song. Mom, like Dad, also Phi Beta Kappa, and to this day can recite poetry and song by heart when she gets prompted. Mom and Dad complement each other well. As impressed as Dad was with Mom and very much in love with her, As a man of practicality, he made the situation clear. No driver's license, no wedding license. Oh, John, yes, I didn't. Okay. He'll say it also. So mom quickly learned to drive. Dad, as a man of practicality, was working long, hard days. And so famously, I guess from the age of 12. And so famously in family lore, the first date of mom and dad was watching the movie A Long Day's Journey into Night, except that only one of them saw it. Dad fell asleep. Was that in yours as well? Fortunately, mom forgave dad. Though not a man of poetry, dad did know how to dance. Fun fact, dad helped pay his way through college as a dance instructor. So mom and dad could cut a rug on the dance floor. Though dad being dad, the steps were done by the book, but they were done well and with bounce. So our childhood consisted of going to family and other events, where as little children, we marveled at mom and dad's dancing. As teenagers, we were age-appropriately mortified by mom and dad's dancing, and as adults, we cherished mom and dad's dancing. They continued their special dance as they built their Jewish household. They made a decision which was not entirely self-evident given their backgrounds, to situate themselves close to a shul and day school where they envisioned enhanced growth in their lives as Jews and where they envisioned immersion of their kids in Jewish life and education. Mom inspired dad with her devotion to Jewish learning and immersion. Dad encouraged mom to further her studies not only informally at synagogue, but formally with an advanced degree at Spertus, and also as an editor of a college textbook on the Holocaust and author of a chapter on Holocaust and art. Mom inspired dad with the type of spirit she wanted our Shabbat at home to have. Friday nights were at home, not at shul growing up. And as our childhood friends would later delight in playfully mocking, songs from the Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat service, such as L'chuna Ranana and L'chadodi, were sung at the Shabbat table. Oh, John, am I hitting all the bingo card things here? And during our grade school years, after Friday night dinner, we danced the Hora by the book. Also, sorry. Mom has a beautiful singing voice, and it was felt in our singing together. Dad would also, of course, sing along, but his voice was apparently memorable for not being exactly Pavarotti. So Dad enjoyed making fun of his own voice and connected with his baseball-loving children by saying that he didn't sing in the key of A major or B minor, but in the key of Z farm team. Did that ring with everything? Yeah, okay, Eshet Chayil. John Eshet Chayil? Eshet Chayil is recited in English, with Dad beaming from his head of the table to Mom at the other end of the table, reciting it lovingly, a recitation that each of us three kids know well and by heart to this day. Recited only by Dad, except for one part. Dad would get to the verse of Kamu vaneha vayashruha, translated as her children rise and praise her. And Dad would say instead, and her children rise and bless her and call her, and then pause, and the three of us would call out, happy. It must have been very fulfilling and validating for Dad and Mom when during our grade school years, one of the Chicago Jewish educational institutions, hi Adina, come. They asked to come to our house on a Friday morning to film us recreating a Shabbat dinner, to be able to introduce others in the Chicago community to a Shabbat experience. Okay, it should be mentioned at this point, Dad lived an utterly uncompartmentalized life, without compartmentalization. Meaning, his professional, his communal, his social, his family life were all intertwined. So as one example, through Dad's work at the law firm, he came regularly into contact with widows and orphans and others in need, whether they were clients or work colleagues. So growing up, our Passover Seder table would regularly include guests who are orphans and widows and other people in need. At times, not even those of the Jewish faith. I suspect that at the time, Dad might not have been aware of the teaching of Maimonides, that in order to have joy on a Jewish holiday, one must include taking care of widows and orphans and others in need. But intuitively, instinctively, Dad and Mom partnered in being a blessing and bringing their blessing of Jewish life to the world. That was Shabbat. What about the work week? In the work week, during our childhood, the division of responsibilities was reasonably clear. Dad entrusted Mom with running the house, and she took care of everyone's needs. Dad would leave the house for work before we woke up, always making sure to turn off the hallway light that had been kept on all night, except for days when one of us was chazanit or chazan or reading Torah at school at Schechter, in which case Dad would come to school dressed in his suit for work with his talit and tefillin and pray with the class. On university teaching nights, Dad would get home at 10:30, but otherwise, like clockwork, he would arrive home around 6:20 after getting off the train at Brayside, always sitting on the upper second level of the train, come home and go immediately upstairs to change out of his suit into normal clothes. Dinner at 6:30. Mom felt the pressure. Dinner on the table at 6:30. Family dinner. After dinner, most nights, Dad sat in the TV room with us, watching with us with a stack of professional reading in his lap. Somehow he absorbed all of that material. I have absolutely no idea how he did it. So that was Shabbat, and that was the work week. But Sundays were another day altogether. Sunday evening, Dad tried to give Mom the night off. We, the kids, would semi-regularly go into the kitchen with Dad and make a surprise dinner preparation. Dad would call it making a concoction. He would see what's in the kitchen, and we would make something. And we would surprise Mom with her Sunday night family dinner. Or we would drive all the way out to Chicago to one of the kosher restaurants so Mom could have the day off. I suppose this is as good a place as any to mention Dad's relationship with food. It starts with 3 words. Dad loved soup. Whether you were at a pizza joint, a coffee house, or a fancy restaurant, Dad wanted to know what was the soup, and he delighted in a good bowl. John adds that if we went to the Dunkin' Donuts on Devon that at the time served soup, when we would come home, Dad would ask us, "Did you have the soup?" Dad, like so many things in life, was pretty easily adaptable. He was pretty easy to please. While Dad enjoyed a fancy steak dinner as much as the next person, on his birthday, what he really wanted was for Mom to make him her special casserole, which had some sort of combination of water chestnuts and peas and tuna and cream of mushroom soup or something like that. And he was the happiest guy on earth. But oh, that love of soup. Most importantly for Sundays, it was what Dad called family time. More than once, we, the kids, would want to go out with friends on a Sunday, and Dad would explain that Sunday was for family time, and that took precedence. And that somehow sufficed. Don't know how he pulled that one off. Not as a father, but he pulled it off. I also don't recall Dad and Mom actually ever setting an actual curfew time, but somehow the expectation not to overdo it was conveyed. But as it is in life, this neat division of responsibility was not actually so neat because challenges are sent our way. Not once, not twice, but 3 different times, Dad was called upon to take intensive care of Mom in an intensive manner for a prolonged period of time. Dad, though, each time was up to the challenge. The first time, when I was in 5th grade, Mom pinched a nerve in her neck and was in the hospital for a prolonged period of time. I remember Dad taking over the running of the house, going shopping at the supermarket with him, cooking and doing laundry with him. And I could tell it was not his normal routine, and he was sort of figuring it out on the fly. But we got the job done. And from then on, we were trained to do certain core family chores, folding laundry, changing bed linens, to help Mom. Then, on September 15th, 1995, Mom was severely burned preparing for Shabbat. Her life at first hanging in the balance, and then for a very long period of time, stabilizing and operating on her and treating her at the regional burn center, not at all close to the house. Dad was superhuman in his care for Mom, traveling daily to the hospital to look after her every need, while also teaching at the university and maintaining his practice at the firm. And once Mom returned home, he assumed all the responsibilities at home until Mom was able to regain her abilities. And then 6 years ago, Mom had neurosurgery, and Dad ever since has assumed all responsibilities for running the house. Shopping, cooking, you name it, he did it, and he did it well. And he took care of everything for Mom. And he flexed his accounting muscles. If you asked him what he made for dinner, he would tell you all 12 fruit that went into the fruit salad and all 15 vegetables that went into the vegetable salad. Dad's partnership and devotion to Mom will forever be an inspiration. Dad loved our friends. He enjoyed their company. He wanted to know about them. He delighted in their smachot. He reveled in the gentle ribbing he would get from them. Dad was very even-keeled, very rarely brought to anger. He had a practice when he sensed someone was beginning to get him angry to count backwards from 10 slowly and to try and let the feeling subside. One of the few times I ever recall him raising his voice in anger really, really loudly was when he felt an injustice was being done to someone. It was a Saturday night. I was in a different part of the house, but I could hear him on the phone sharing with great emotion his feeling about an injustice being done to someone who was already a disadvantaged person. He saved that emotion for very, very rare circumstances. Otherwise, he felt he could discuss and dialogue and find a way forward through just about anything. Dad and I would joke at times about how certain things that would otherwise be viewed as bummers turn out to be blessings. A dad example. When Dad, a little over 10 years ago, broke his wrist on a January 2nd in the ice outside their home in Highland Park. That was it. They were moving. After decades in their old house, that was it. They were not going to risk health like that anymore. And it turned into a massive blessing. As it led Mom and Dad to move to the Barclay in Lincolnwood, at just the right time for their lives to become part of the special community there and at Yehuda Moshe at a time that worked out perfectly right for Mom and Dad. Dad accepted me for what I had become. When he and Mom were honored in the late 80s, mid to late 80s at ICJA, in his acceptance speech, he said, "It shouldn't be that our children know all about Lincoln and Washington and they don't know about Moses in the same regard." He felt that immersing oneself in both elements of study, both elements of knowledge, both elements of life was crucial for our identity. And he understood that the path I ended up taking in my life was following through on the education that Mom and he had encouraged me to take. And he was not anything but fully supportive. Rabbi Akiva teaches us in the Mishnah in Avot, Chaviv Adam Shnivra B'Tselem. It's beloved that a person was born in the image of God. Chiba Yetera, it's even more special. Nodat Lo Shnivra B'Tselem, the man knows that he was born that way. Chaviv in Yisrael Shnikru Vanim L'Makom. It's beloved that Israel is called children to God, but it's even Chiba Yetera, it's even more beloved that they know that they were called. It's one thing to be loved by someone. It is a whole other thing to know that one is loved by someone. In a few days, it'll be Passover, when the time of the temple, families would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to see and be seen by the holy presence there, Alat Re'iyah. The Torah already understood long ago the importance of being seen, whether on an individual basis or as part of a community, to have our worth noticed and acknowledged and validated to us. We live in times where people can feel transparent, can feel invisible, can feel not seen. Every child desperately wants to feel truly seen and loved by one's parents. Easier said than done. Perhaps one of the major challenges of our times as parents. This year, for me, marks 40 years since I last lived at home with my parents, and a quarter century since I lived in the same side of the globe as my parents. And it is my everlasting gratitude to God above that I cannot imagine having felt more seen and validated and encouraged and loved and appreciated and trusted, even with suggestions for improvement, than the way my father has seen me and validated me and encouraged me and loved me and appreciated me and believed in me and trusted me throughout. We had some very special times together the past few months. Some very business and management of affairs oriented, and others exceedingly tender. Over Shabbat, Dad's last day on earth, with Dad very weak, I was privileged to say to Dad one last time that I loved him, that we all loved him, and I listed all of us as loving him. And in response, Dad did not reflect the comment back at me and say, I love you too. Instead, like my beloved wife Neva, I was blessed to have him say back to me with the loving, being truly seen twinkle in his eye, I know. I am not the firstborn like Uncle Marvin, I'm just a middle child. But I have been blessed to have a father in my life who has inspired me by example, whether at home or elsewhere on the family or friend tree, whether in shul or in school, whether professionally in community or with humanity, to fearlessly aim to spread the light of a Jew, to try and be a source of blessing to the world, and all the while with a sweetness and a sense of hakarat hatov, a sense of gratitude and blessing. You have earned, Dad, Avi Mori, Harini Kaparat Mishkavo. You have earned and deserve everyone's adoration, everyone's love, and everyone's respect. On behalf of all of us in the family, we beg your mechila gemura, your forgiveness for any slight, any disrespect that was ever paid to you. As Dad said a number of times over the past few months, he is 88 years old and feels fulfilled in every sphere of his life. It would certainly be a fitting legacy and tribute to Avi Mori, to my father, Harini Kaparat Mishkavod, to adopt this attitude, to internalize the sensibility, and to perpetuate it and pay it forward. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
I'm Jonathan. I'll be brief. Judaism is full of threes. The world is based on three principles: Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasidim. Torah, service of God, acts of loving kindness. Later on this week, and this is what I call the Uncle Ron, when do we eat rule. Uncle Ron, this is for you. All right, Rabban Gamliel. All right, as long as you knock off Pesach, Matzah, Maror, you can get to the food, because Uncle Ron, every time he would come over for the many meals at our house, that was always the first question: when do we eat? He wanted to dispense with all the preliminaries, and sometimes, in fact, he would just run down to the basement. He would go right for the desserts that you had out, Mom. But today, right, for the next few minutes, because that's all it's going to be, there's another three that we're going to talk about, which is the three pillars of growing up in our house, and the outsized role that Dad had in them, which were school, synagogue, and home. School. The pioneering sociologist, Marshall Sclair, whose brother and sister and wife, by the way, my folks were friendly with, wrote an important piece in the 1950s and late 1960s called Lakeville, Jewish Identity on the Suburban Frontier. It was actually a study of Highland Park and Glencoe. The study took place a couple years before Mom and Dad moved to Highland Park, but it gave me a certain sense of the dynamics of the community. And when Marshall Sclair came back in the early 1970s to do an update, he said, I just discovered the most important institution in Lakeville, which is the creation of its first Jewish day school. And I was in the kindergarten class of that school at Solomon Schechter in Northbrook in 1971. And we have to remember at that time, that was in Lee Road. Northbrook Court was just a pipe dream. This was considered like the boonies. It was not a normal thing for people to think about sending their kids to a day school. Mom and Dad did not have it growing up. They wanted us to have this. That was a very, very important piece of their identity. They wanted us to have that grounding that we didn't have. And not only that, they were thrilled when we became more knowledgeable than them, and we became the teachers. So we were not just proxies, that we were going to learn all this stuff, and they would just take, have nachas. No, so they would actually learn what we were doing in school. That was really, really important to them. One story, all right? I was in 8th grade, Jeremy was in 7th grade. This is our first family trip to Israel in 1980, all right? And early on in the trip, my dad was really letting me and Jer have it. Mir, he let you off the hook because you're only 9. And he was really screaming at us. He's like, I don't get it. I've spent so much money sending you guys to Schechter. You learn Ivrit half the day. But we get to Israel, all I'm hearing is English. We're going to David Hoffman's house on Friday night in Jerusalem. He's the president of the board of Schechter. What am I going to tell him? Right. So fast forward a couple days, and my dad, one of the lawyers at law firm, Steve Canner, had a cousin at a kibbutz Afikim. So his cousin, he was trying to make contact with them. My dad was in the shower. I answered the phone, and the cousin goes, English not good? And I go, it's okay, we can have a discussion in Hebrew, right? And so for the next, we were able to talk. What do you do? What do you do in the kibbutz? Where have you been to Israel? How do we get to it and all that? And so the next thing I know, right, we're able to have the whole discussion in Hebrew, and I get the information that I need. So I'm finding out, by that point, my dad's out of the shower, right? And he's standing there, dripping wet with this towel, dumbfounded, looking like this for about 10 or 15 minutes, observing all this, and I'm clueless. So I then turn around to him and I said, so Dad, what are you going to tell Mr. Hoffman now? Right? But school was incredibly important. So that's a school, right? Synagogue. Again, my dad was incredibly active in any synagogue that he was involved with. In Beth El's, North Suburban Synagogue, Beth El's official published history, I don't know if Mort Steinberg is here, but he rates a mention. He was the longest serving member in its history in the ritual committee. I think he spent at least 4 decades on that committee. And he always came to shul very, very early. And in fact, whenever Grandma and Grandpa Ament would visit, they were actually there even before we got there. So now I know where he got it from. And the thing is, we're not even German Jews, we're Glitzianers, right? So we can't even use that as an excuse, the fact they came so early. And Kiddush, my dad loved. Like, they were the life of the party, and they were basically the last ones to close the joint out. And so I often joke with my peeps in my current community. I spent most of my early life being the first people in shul and the last people out, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to reverse both trends. Although sadly, for the next 11 months, Dad, you're pulling me in, at least in terms of getting to shul early, so I can't win. So that's the synagogue piece. And then finally home, right? And so the story that Jerry told about, no marriage license, no driver's license, the other part, there were 2 things, 2 demands. That was number 1. Number 2 was, got to keep kosher home. Got to keep kosher, right? So again, even before they got married, even before they moved to Highland Park, even before we went to day school, right, the home, right, had to have that special significance, and it always did, and so one of those songs, around Friday night, it got a real reputation among the chevra. So then literally, Mitch Beam brought out those pom-poms, cheerleading pom-poms when the Chudna Ranana was being chanted. You can't make this stuff up unless you were actually there. And yes, we actually did, Mir, Israeli dancing on Friday nights. We did it because, Dad would love to see the stuff that we were learning in school. And so, yeah, he'd come home with, Hotel California albums and Barry Manilow, but he'd also come home with an album of, the Hasidic Song Festival. Remember when Israel used to do those, right? And, Sipurei Pugi, right? So this was part of our growing up. And we had really kind of fun on Shabbat. Like one of our favorites on Shabbat afternoon was, Dad would dress up in Mom's bathrobe, and he'd put on a shower cap, and then he'd lie on the bed, and it was the job of me and Jared to try to get him off the bed. And poor Miriam, her job was to try to cause as much trouble to the two of us so that we wouldn't be able to succeed, right? That was growing up. So that's, and then, Mir, you and Dad had a real bond, particularly when your brother, when I was hearing Marvin talk in terms of, oh, you must be so-and-so's, brother. So it was just you and Dad, and so you would have bonding nights over watching Dynasty on TV. Remember Joan Collins, remember that show? So, Dad had those moments of being able to bond in terms of that. So those were really the three pillars growing up. Sure. A couple other things that need to be said here, and I promise I'm the last speaker, right? One is that these past 3 months have been incredibly rough, but we are so very grateful to the existing caregivers that we already had, right? We've already had for Cecilia, for Vanjie, and Phil Elvira. They were pressed into unexpected double duty, having to care for not one, but two individuals pretty much around the clock without any advance warning. And the care was given not only well, but with love. And Cecilia, my dad always loved how I used to give him, those, the baths. It made such a difference in being able to have him keep going those last few months, which were just horrible. Okay, so the last thing for tonight, because as you probably know, my dad was very organized and very planned out, right? So less than a week after he got diagnosed, he was already busy at the computer, and he prints, and so one of the times I visited him that week, he prints this out and hands it to me. I want you to read this at my funeral. Okay, here we go. Shalom chavirim and mishpacha. Susan and I have requested our oldest son, Jonathan, to deliver this message to you. On the first day of the week of the reading of Parashat Vayechi, which was January 5th, Sunday, January 5th, I was brought to Evanston Hospital, where I was diagnosed over 4 days with several metastatic masses and a poor prognosis. The Parashah focuses on the deaths of Jacob and Joseph. Curiously, our son Jeremy's Hebrew name is Yaakov, after my maternal grandfather, and my Hebrew name Yosef is after my paternal grandfather. The final messages of both Jacob and Joseph is to be buried in Canaan, Israel. Our son Yaakov made Aliyah with his wife, and then 3, now 6 children 25 years ago. Israel has been calling to us for quite a while, and the events of my illness and the Torah reading confirmed to us a call to come home to Eretz Yisrael. So after this service, Jeremy will accompany me to Gush Etzion for burial. Susan, Jonathan, Miriam, and the family will sit Shiva in Lincolnwood, and some of this is edited since. And then Jeremy and Neva are going to return to Chicago to sit Shiva for a day before returning to Israel to observe Pesach. Susan will ultimately follow in the future to be buried in Israel with me. We thank you for your prayers and beautiful thoughts. Lehitraot, Susan and Joe Ament.
Since it is the month of Nisan, we don't say the Molei, the regular memorial prayer. We will say Psalms chapter 16. And please rise. Michtam LeDavid, Shamrini El Ki Chasi Sivach, Amart Ladonai, Adonai Ata, Tavasi Balalecha, Mikdoshim Asher Ba'aretz Heima, V'adire Kol Chef Tzibam, Yirbu Atzvosam Acher Maharu, Balasich Tizkehem Midam, Balasash Mosam El Svosai, Adonai Manas Chalki V'chosi, Ata Tamlich Korali, Chavalim Nafluli Banimim, Af Nachalas Shafra Aloi, Avarecha Sanay Asher Yotzani, Aflelos Yisruni Chal Yosai, Shivisi Adonai L'negdi Samid, Kimi Mini, Balamot, Lachein Samach Libi, Vayogol Kivodi, Af Besari Yishkon Levetach, Kilos Azov Nafshi Lishol, Lo Sitin Chasidichol Liros Shachas, Todini Orach Chaim, Salvas Mochos, Aspenecha, Nimas B'mincha Netzach. Yichtam LeDavid, Guard me, God, for in you I have taken refuge. You have said to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good beyond you. As for the holy ones who are on the earth, and the mighty in whom is all my desire, their sorrows will multiply, those that run into other gods. Their blood libations will not pour out, nor take their names upon my lips. The Lord is my allotted portion and my share. You sustain my fate. Portions have fallen to me in pleasant places. Lovely indeed is my estate. I will bless the Lord who has given me counsel. My conscience admonishes me at night. I have set the Lord before me always, because God is at my right hand. I shall not falter. Therefore my heart rejoices, and my entire being exults. Also my body will rest secure, for you will not abandon me to the grave, nor will you let your devout one see destruction. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. There is delight at your right hand for eternity. You may be seated.
This concludes the service here. The interment will take place Tuesday, approximately 12 noon Israel time, at Kfar Etzion Cemetery in the Gush Etzion. The family will be sitting Shiva at 4545 Tui. There are times that the family is requested for visitors not to come, and there will be mincha at 7:10 p.m. As mentioned, Jeremy will be going to Israel. We'll be back Wednesday morning, and then he will leave Thursday morning to go back to Israel for Pesach. If we can all rise as we escort the casket from the chapel, and the family will follow behind, and then we'll immediately go to our vehicles.